Hi everyone, Miss Gooch here, and this is a video all about unseen poetry, how to understand and analyse a poem you have never encountered before. So this is important because in your second literature exam, the final part of that exam, which is worth 32 marks, will give you a poem you've never seen before and ask you to analyse it. So this video is all about how to approach that. And we're going to do that in 3 steps. So we're going to firstly read for meaning, then we're going to read for language, and then we're going to read for structure. So let me explain these a little bit more. When we're reading for meaning, we're asking ourselves, what's the poem about? What message or idea is the speaker conveying? How does it link to the question? And when we're reading for language, we're thinking about what words show the speaker's feelings. Have they used any language features that express these? And when we're reading for structure, we're thinking about how the poet has basically put the poem together. So their use of stanzas or rhyme or enjambment or caesura or line length can be a range of things, and how do these help to convey their feelings. So just to be clear, when you get your poem, it'll come, the poem will be here, and then you'll get a question underneath it. I'll just put it at the top, but it will be underneath the poem. And the first thing you should do is read the question so you know what you're looking for right from the start. So it says here, in Alone in the Woods, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about nature? And let's just clarify, the poet is the person who's written the poem, and the speaker is the voice in the poem. So it's a bit like having the writer or the author and then the character. We can't just assume that they're the same unless the poem that says like, oh, this is an autobiographical poem, the poet has written this about themselves. We need to separate them out. So how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about nature? That's what we're looking for. So let's read this poem through together now and keep that question in mind. How does the speaker of the poem, the voice of the poem, seem to feel about nature? Alone in the woods, I felt the bitter hostility of the sky and the trees. Nature has taught her creatures to hate man that fusses and fumes, unquiet man, as the sap rises in the trees. As the sap paints the trees a violent green, so rises the wrath of nature's creatures at man. So paints the face of nature a violent green. Nature is sick at man, sick at his fuss and fume, sick at his agonies, sick at his gaudy mind that drives his body ever more quickly, more and more in the wrong direction. Okay, so the first thing to do is read for meaning. So I want you to pause the video now, write a 30-word summary of what you think the poem is about. So feel free to read through the poem again. What is your summary? Pause it and write it down. So here's my attempt. I've said the speaker is in the woods and feels that that nature is angry at man for disturbing the peace and making nature sick. That was my interpretation. Doesn't matter if it's not the same as yours. That's the great thing about poetry. Everybody can read it in a slightly different way. So as long as you've got the evidence from the poem to prove your summary, you're fine. So we've understood the poem. We know what it's about. It's about the anger that nature feels at man. Now we're going to read for language. So I'm going to give you some questions that are going to direct you towards language in the poem that you can analyse. Feel free to analyse other things as well. These are just 5 questions. And again, pause the video and then I'll go through my interpretation after. Here we go. Alright, so this first question, what feeling do you expect when you hear the phrase alone in the woods? Alone in the woods. Now, my first thought when I hear that is, oh, that's scary. So I think that there's going to be something fearful, or really depending on the time of day or the atmosphere, it could be quite peaceful. So when we then get this anger, it's unexpected. It flips what we expect. It subverts our expectations. Unexpected anger of nature here. So we start off feeling one thing, and then it flips and changes. And maybe that's because the writer wanted us to go on the speaker's journey. They went to the woods for maybe peace, and instead got there, and then were just sort of like whacked in the face with this anger that they like suddenly felt in the wood's presence. So what does the phrase bitter hostility convey about nature? Well, this is an interesting one because we're going to look at both parts. So if you're bitter about something, you become bitter because you've had a bad experience. So people normally say, oh, they're a bitter old person, or because over time, if you keep having bad experiences, you're going to become bitter, you're going to become angry at the world. So it suggests that nature's had a lot of bad experiences. And again, with hostility, I mean, hostility is like extreme unfriendliness. So the speaker's obviously gone here and feels hostility, feels unwelcome here. The woods and nature has not welcomed this speaker into their space. But it can also link to war. So there can be hostilities between two countries, can mean that they're at war. So maybe the idea that nature is sort of declaring war on man, it's just had enough. We could think about that. And then let's have a think about this third question. How does the third line flip the usual image of Mother Nature? So nature has taught her creatures to hate. Now, when we think about nature normally, it's normally in that female, well, use the female pronoun here, that maternal instinct, caring, nurturing. So this flips, or I can use a bit of a fancier word, subverts that maternal image of nature. And maybe that's just something that man has imposed on nature, because there's no reason that nature would be a mother. It's just because of, the idea of birth and like growing things is quite a female image. But in this poem, it's all about nature's anger. I mean, if you wanted to get really deep, maybe you could start linking it to feminism and the reason, this Stevie Smith is actually a woman. That's the poet, but you wouldn't be expected to do that for this question. It's just something to think about. How does the imagery violent green present the speaker's view of nature? So this phrase violent green, now again, normally green, our expectations of that is like like growth and life. That's what we think about when we see the color green, because it reminds us of trees and being outdoors. But then it's combined with this adjective violent, so it's aggressive. And you think about the fact that the speaker's in the woods, that means it's everywhere. So everywhere they feel this aggression. It links to what we're saying up here with the bitter hostility that they're feeling, the idea that everything hates them. We didn't do this one as a question, but the wrath of nature is like, feel my wrath, feel my anger, feel my fury. So linking that to the colour green just shows it's everywhere. So everywhere they turn is this aggression. And then how could we link the fumes and the agonies to a message about climate change? So it says fumes twice. Man that fusses and fumes, sick at his fuss and fume. And now, I don't think we can ignore the fact that this links to the idea of pollution. And maybe that's the cause of nature's anger in the first place. The fact that we have come and polluted the earth with chemicals and gases and whatever else. And we've inflicted pain on ourselves and on nature. So we could think about that as a link to the message about climate change potentially. So we've done that. You're probably going to get the most of your analysis out of the language, and then we're going to have a look at the structure. So again, have a read of these questions, pause the video, and then I'll tell you my interpretation when you're done. Okay, so a little amendment to my question 1. There is a sneaky little full stop there, which you can think about analysing here, but we're going to go mainly for the fact that there's enjambment the whole way through. Enjambment is no punctuation at the end of a line. And there's many ways you could interpret this. What you don't want to just say is, oh, it makes the poem flow, or something that's very general, because that could be the same for any poem. It needs to link really clearly to this poem's message. So for me, that ongoing nature of the poem, is like, we could link it to the force of nature, how it's an unstoppable force, and that's why the poem continues the way it does. We could also link it to the idea of overwhelming anger, and now nature has unleashed this anger. It can't be stopped. It's just going to keep coming and coming. And then for the second one, why might the poet include repetition of the adjective sick? So we've got this here, sick, 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 repeated throughout. And repetition is always for emphasis. It's trying to emphasize something. And for me, this is emphasizing the key message. And the message is that we are making nature ill and angry because she's ill. And I mean, you could also think about the double meaning of the word sick, because you can be disgusted. You say, oh, that makes me sick, maybe because they're disgusted, or it can be because you're poorly. So you could read that in either way. Either way, it links to nature's anger, either because they're disgusted at man or because they're sick because of man. So you could have to think about either of those things. Once you've done that in the exam, you wouldn't take quite this long to do it, but we are still practicing. You spend about 5 minutes doing that in the exam, and then you have to get down to your analysis, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to remind myself of the question. In Alone in the Woods, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about nature? And I need to have a key concept, which is a central argument, basically answering that question. I need evidence from the poem, I need my language analysis, I need my structure analysis, and I want to try and explore multiple ideas. So I'm going to have a go now. Feel free to pause the video now, don't watch my model, and have a go straight as you are now if you feel quite confident, or you can watch my model and then carry on from mine. Okay, so I'm going to type just because it's a little bit quicker. Let me get my text box. So my key concept, my answer to this question. So I'm going to say, in Alone in the Woods, and then I use the words from the question. So the poet presents the speaker as feeling, I'm going to say, intimidated by, and I'm going to capitalise nature, the force of nature's anger. Because nature's capitalised in the poem, I want to keep that going. So I'm going to say, they describe and I'm going to use that quote, the bitter hostility of the trees and sky. Oh, other way around, sorry. The sky and the trees. So I'm going to say, usually the sky and trees are described as beautiful and giving a sense of freedom. But here they create a sense of fear. Because of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The extent of nature's anger. I'm going to go for that. And then I'm going to go into my language analysis. I'm going to say the adjective bitter, and just like I said from my annotations, I'm just going to copy it straight up. So I'm going to say, suggests nature has had too many bad experiences, and this is what has turned her against man. And I'm going to use a nice connective, so I'm going to say, additionally, the noun, I like to use my subject words, the noun hostility conveys unfriendliness. Notice I'm just literally taking my annotations. Unfriendliness, and suggesting the speaker feels unwelcome in the woods. Maybe particularly because they are alone and facing this rage without another human there. Nice link to the title. It could also convey, actually I'm going to say something different from convey. Also link to war. As if nature, capitalized, has declared war on man. And I link it back to my key concept, enhancing the intimidation that the speaker would feel. They might feel under attack. And then I think it would link nicely to that next one about how nature has taught her creatures to hate. You could link to that idea of maybe creating an army against man, because that's a nice continuation of that war theme. The thing I haven't done, you'll notice, what I haven't done is the structure analysis. I will do that next. I'm going to leave it up to you here though. I'm going to just color code it for you, and this is all my language analysis. You can see I have explored multiple ideas because I've got that much language analysis. So I'll full screen this, have a go at writing your own and send it over to your teacher when it's done.